there is this false security blanket that they feel like the cell phone is going to protect their child in some way
Hmm.
from some terrible, terrible, heinous act like that. And the truth of it is, that's not true. Your child is far more likely to encounter bullying from social media than they are to encounter a school shooting. The effects that I see on every kid that are negative from phones far outweigh whatever we as parents imagine giving our kids a phone at school prevents something bad happening to them.
Welcome to Faith and Culture Now. I'm Dr. Scott Schiffer, and today I'm joined by Jillian Brown. Jillian, it's always good to have you here.
Thanks. Good to be here.
So tonight we're going to be talking about the book, The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. And he is a scholar who has written a number of books just to sort of help Americans, specifically Americans, think critically about culture, about life, about the family, about politics. And particularly, this book deals with um, issues facing our youth today. And so, Jillian, I know you have read the book. What are some of your first sort of initial takeaways from the text itself?
Well, my profession at the moment is I am a junior high school teacher. I teach choir. And so, because of that, I've seen firsthand the effects of cell phones on kids and adults within the school system. And especially last year when I transitioned into junior high out of the elementary age, it was just such a striking problem. And we are actually a school district that technically bans phones during the day. So the students are supposed to put their phones away once the first bell rings in the morning, and they're not supposed to have them out again until they leave at the end of the day. And that most definitely does not happen. And so um, I just found it so interesting to observe students last year um, truly have an addiction to these devices. And so do adults. So I don't want to put all of the blame on the students because, for one thing, we are modeling for them our behavior. I'm very aware of it with my own children. We're all trying to make an effort just when we go out to eat, that we're sitting at the table, not just all looking at our phones. It's so hard to do. It's so, so, so hard to do. And so I think just last year, observing this throughout the year, that even if the phone was in a kid's backpack, the fact that the backpack was in the room was itself a distraction, to the point where my policy this year is that kids don't bring backpacks in my room. They must leave them outside in the hall. And
Oh,
it
wow.
has changed. Yeah, it's actually changed my life. It's changed my life. Just that barrier of it not being in the room has, I can tell you now, just second month into teaching, it has revolutionized the attention level I'm getting from these students. And that sounds so small, but it's a really big deal. And so what I appreciated about reading the book over the summer was the amount of research that Jonathan Haidt is clearly a specialist in analyzing, putting together all of this research in a way that, a layperson can pretty easily understand it. And he talks about different facets of this anxious generation and really the stark increase from about 2010 on, with all the data and the graphs and the research of anxiety increasing in kids primarily and young adults, and this distinctly tied with girls to social media
Hmm.
and with boys to primarily video games and also pornography.
Hmm.
So that was kind of the two branches of, when you first looked at the boys, they kind of didn't seem as impacted, but that's when they were just looking at social media. But when they looked at the impact of basically social deficits in boys, and I am a mother of two sons who are both 10 and 12, almost 13. And this was the summer we discussed getting a cell phone for our oldest son. And yes, we in fact did, because he's playing sports now where he travels on a bus out of town. Um, and that was kind of the catalyst for it, but also realizing there's all kinds of controls that we as parents can have on our kids' devices should we choose to do the homework and do that. So it was helpful both professionally for me to evaluate things I could do differently in my everyday life with students, also just in conversation with parents. Um, and then also as a parent, it's really helped me look for signs in my kids and in myself of addiction to
Hmm.
these devices. I've heard people call them distraction boxes, and I think that's just such a quaint and accurate way of summing up what they really just are. They're
Yeah,
just distractions all of the time. So
for
that's kind of
sure.
my overall take on it.
When you watch TV, there's commercials. That's when you get up and go, do something, come back to your seat when the show comes back on or whatever. When the show ends, there's a definite conclusion. It's okay to turn off the TV, get up and walk around. With a lot of social media, especially on phones, you just go from one video to the next and there's no break, there's no end point, there's no conclusion. And so the next thing you know, you spent 3 hours on something you meant to spend 10 minutes on, and then things didn't get done. Um, to your point about the classroom, in my older girls' school this year, they have implemented a new policy, and there is a phone box in every classroom. And when you walk into the classroom, you're supposed to have your phone either on silent or turned off or something, and put it in that box. And you don't have to take it to your desk. And I think that has helped the school in general. My kids tell me that some of their quote nicer teachers just let you keep it in your backpack, but none of them want you to have it out. Um, and uh, I think there's value in that. But then you also see schools trying to go paperless. And so they're giving kids devices. And so even when they're not on their phone, they're on something. And, you do have kids that are trying to pull up, videos and games and other things, even on the school issued devices. So then the schools end up locking everything down. I hate going to the school campus myself because my phone gets messed up like every time I go onto the campus because I'm not on the proper network, and it just like kills everything on my phone. And so then I have to get 2 miles away from the school before everything starts working properly again. But I also see their need and sort of the requirement for them to have to do that because they don't want kids on other things all the time that are not part of their actual learning. Um,
Yeah, it's interesting how much thought has to go into
yeah.
preventing access.
And
It's so much time and effort that is being spent on preventing access to things on the internet in education right now,
yeah.
which I understand we need kids to be technology savvy and all of that, but it feels like such an enormous waste of time and energy.
Hmm.
The amount of prevention, even like I'm saying, I had to reorganize the entire way just that we enter the room just to prevent the possibility of walking by your backpack while you exit my room to go to the bathroom and pick up your phone while you're going. And could
Right.
they still do that? And do they still do that when they exit my room? Probably, but we have cameras in the hall. And see, we
Yeah.
don't have cameras in the room. And so that's partly why I did it, because if they're gonna go get their cell phone out of their backpack, they're gonna get caught now in the hallway. And I'm not having to police it because as a teacher, we already have so much on our plate. And
Right.
to add the policing of the cell phone, or maybe people know this and maybe they don't, we all have this ability to pull up all of their computer screens on our computer screen.
Hmm.
Fortunately, I teach choir, so I don't really have to do this because we maybe use our Chromebooks once a quarter
Hmm.
to do evaluation or something. So I try to be as technology free on their end. I mean, we use technology at the front of the room, but you're right. I mean, even we did officer elections this week, and I asked the kids to send me a video because that's how they communicate.
Right.
And so, it's even as much as I try to put restrictions around it, it's still such a part of their world that we have to find ways to also still incorporate it. So
Yes.
it's really bad.
Pew Research recently did some statistics on device use and different generations of people. There's sort of a generation, around people of the ages around 50 to 60 right now use their phones quite a bit. Um, and then it drops a little bit for people around, say, 40 to 50. But you start looking at, and then actually, I think in the 30s, it drops a little bit more. I think it's because they got so frustrated with parents being on their phones all the time. And so they've kind of rebelled a little bit. But with the younger generation, you're typically seeing between 4 and 7 hours of screen time a day outside of school. And I mean, that's like essentially when you get outside of school until you lay your head down on the pillow at night, that's that's your screen time. And that's
Yeah.
so much. And I know with regard to security and safety and stuff like that. Um, in fact, we've done a podcast on this a long time ago, but I've got a buddy who is a police officer, and all he does is cybercrime. And so a significant portion of what he does deals with teenagers. And one of the areas is bullying. And cyberbullying has increased significantly since 2010. But, when I was in high school a long time ago in the 90s, if someone was bullied after school, they had a break from the bullying until they got back to school the next day. And because of the way that people use social media now, kids who are bullied get no reprieve, they get no break from it. And I think that is one of the significant factors that drives up anxiety and depression and other things. Um, Another thing that you see is people on social media like to put their best foot forward. Um, my younger girls really like to watch the Ninja Kids on YouTube. Um, I am not as big of a fan as my younger girls are, but that's okay. Um, I'm not their target audience, but they're always going and doing something, and they make it always look really fun. But then you think about it, and it's like, on Christmas morning, they're making videos for their YouTube channel, and it's not really fun. It's work. They're doing work every day. And some days they're at a park and it looks like they're having fun, but they were probably at that park for 8 hours filming their 1 hour video. And so you don't really see all the behind the scenes stuff. I mean, that's like pretty innocent, easy stuff. But then you start thinking about, moms who put pictures on the internet with every kid smiling and looking really good, and all their hair's in the right place, and nobody's got a stain on their outfit. And then what you don't see, all the yelling and screaming and crying and everything else, bribing kids with candy or whatever that's happening behind the scenes to get that one perfect picture. And you don't see the 35 other pictures that were taken that were not perfect that didn't get loaded to the social media page. And so what happens is, of course, people start then comparing their life to what they see. Uh, and then you start getting, again, anxious and depressed and other things, thinking you're not doing it right or you're not good enough or you can't keep up or whatever else. Jonathan Haidt's book is not in a book, it's called The Anxious Generation, but it's not really intended to be like a fear-mongering book, right? It's meant to be a, hey, look, let's recognize this problem. Let's find some solutions to this problem. So, what are some of the ways you think that he does well at sort of giving advice for, the book is primarily written for parents, but specifically for adults dealing with kids, for moving forward and making some better choices or better boundaries.
A through line in the book, kind of parallel to the cell phone usage, is this idea of safetyism that parents have since the 80s really just really become, there's no other word for it, but overprotective of their
Yeah,
kids.
like
And so
helicoptering and all that kind of stuff, right?
absolutely. And I'm guilty of it 100%. So I'm not here judging anybody, but um so toward the very last part of the book talks about what can we do about all this now, and he addresses the biggest way to move forward is to do so in community. And
Hmm.
so real quick, I'm going to go back to the thing you mentioned about bullying, because what I want parents to know as a teacher, the most common thing I hear from parents is that they want their kids to have a cell phone because they feel like they are safer at school. And
Hmm.
I just said, I gave my kid a cell phone because he's going on buses. And there is an element of me feeling like I at least know where he is if there were to be a bus accident or something.
Hmm.
So, so once again, I am also part of these parents. But I think, and so tragically, with yet another school shooting this last week in Georgia, the thing I hear most often from parents is that there is this false security blanket that they feel like the cell phone is going to protect their child in some way
Hmm.
from some terrible, terrible, heinous act like that. And the truth of it is that's not true, number one. And number two, your child is far more likely to encounter bullying from social media than they are to encounter a school shooting. As awful, and one is too many. But the effects that I see on every kid that are negative from phones far outweigh whatever we as parents imagine giving our kids a phone at school prevents something bad happening to them. And I can speak to that actually even last year at my school. There was not a threat at the school, but there was externally. And so, we go into what's called soft lockdown. And I had to keep saying to the kids, do not go get your cell phone and text your parent. And I couldn't say what was going on, but I knew there was a threat outside. And what we didn't want was parents to come up into the parking lot where there potentially was a threat. And so
Yeah.
that's the thing. You're trusting that 12-year-olds have the judgment. And furthermore, as somebody who's in a classroom who has to conduct lockdown drills, the kind of chaos, I have 39 kids in my room. That's my biggest class. I see 30 to 40 kids every class. The thought that all 40 of them would have a cell phone when I'm trying to get them to be silent and know what to do. I just think as parents, we don't often enough put ourselves in the situation that that actually looks like
Hmm.
and understand that it's not preventing anything that we think it is. And on the flip side, all of these kids are having negative effects from the phone. So that's my huge disclaimer of I don't think cell phones should be allowed at school at all. Period.
Sure.
Not even in the building. I don't. And I started this school year by telling my son he couldn't take it to school. I do work at his school, so that's not fair of me to say, but he ended up having to take it to school because he's in student council and they make videos. And so
Yeah.
so see, like, it's and so that leads me to the way forward is community, because the other thing I hear parents say most often is, well, they have to have one or they will have no social life because all of their friends are on social media. And so what Jonathan Haidt specifically says is when you are in the elementary years, third, fourth, fifth grade, that you sign a pact with at least 8 to 10 other families that you're going to hold off on a cell phone until at least 13, and
Hmm.
that you're going to hold off on social media until 16. And then, and of course, as people who are in the church, this should be easier for us if we have communities who are like-minded.
Right.
A lot of people aren't churched. And so that's his recommendation, is that you find people who will walk alongside you so that your kid is not ostracized at school, because
Sure.
that is a huge deal.
Well, and if
Um,
you're, taking like if your kids are in a sports league or something, it's other parents on the kids' teams every year. Or, if your kids are doing some kind of, um, you know, art school or something like that outside of, Boy Scouts or whatever. I mean, you find your communities and then you meet people that are doing like-minded things to work with you along these kind of things.
Absolutely. So, I mean, that's the biggest and necessary step. And he acknowledges that might not be possible for everybody.
Hmm.
Um, then the second thing that he strongly recommends is just frankly getting kids outside, or as the kids would say, touching grass more
Yeah.
often. And so, again, just a personal practice with the approval of my administration that I adopted last year is my students, if they have 5 good rehearsals for the second half of their class on Friday, I take them outside. It's not structured. I
Uh-huh.
bring playground equipment, football, basketball, And as long as it's not raining,
Hmm.
they go outside and they talk to each other and they have no cell phones. And so, um, through 8th grade, that is still so necessary that they are, I mean, I think it's necessary always, but I know there's limitations once you hit high school. So getting kids outside, moving their body, talking to other kids without a device between them, because again, I do have the benefit of working in a school where technically phones aren't allowed, and so at lunch they're not allowed to sit on their devices.
Hmm.
So I do think what I witness is probably more social activity than your average school that does allow cell phones all day. Kids just don't speak to each other. They
Yeah.
are constantly head down in their phone. And and it's interesting because when I give the option maybe not to go outside, to stay inside, play board games or do some other things, um, and it's always the girls. They say, "Can we get on our phones?" So,
Yeah.
that's what they want to do. They want to be creating TikToks and they want to be doing, and some of that's not bad. The creative side of that, I don't have a problem with.
Hmm.
Um, but we're not gonna do it at school. We're not gonna
Right,
get on
right.
school. So, I think I mean, he lays out all kinds of different ideas for what that could look like at different ages. Um, sports are an obvious option, but they're not for every kid. I mean, I
Right.
say that as somebody who's a musician, and so I think you have to work at it. You have to make an effort, and something we're trying to figure out in our family is creating an actual calendar, an actual schedule around after school screen time so that it does not just become an endless block of time
Yeah.
that has no boundary around it. And it's hard.
No, it
It's
makes sense. We use Custodio in our house, and that allows me to put limits on screen time for kids. But something my wife and I have talked about a lot is when they're on their screen time on their phone, we still don't really know. I mean, we might know they're on YouTube, but we don't really know what they're watching. But when the when the kids are watching television, if we walk in the room, we know immediately what they're watching. We don't necessarily know um, the whole story, like maybe we haven't seen that episode or whatever, but we know at least what it is they're doing, and that kind of helps us to at least have a better understanding of what they're engaging in and indulging in. My oldest daughter had to have Snapchat last year for school because that's how one of the coaches at school decided they were going to communicate with the team, and so and we of course are very limiting on a lot of that kind of stuff. And Snapchat's where if you look at all the things like they say kids shouldn't have, like that's like at the top of the list. And so it kind of cracks me up. But you're right. I mean, it is hard to get away from all of that completely, but I don't think it's wrong to at least put some boundaries in place and try to help create some healthy habits. And the outside thing, that is really important. When we were kids in the 80s, it was like, hey, it's breakfast. After breakfast, go outside, come in for lunch. And then after lunch, it was like, all right, see you at dinner time. And, there was riding your bicycles and, you go to your friend's house or whatever. And if you went somewhere, you were typically expected to call your parents, let them know you were going, but you use the phone at the home you were going to, not some cell phone or anything. I was watching a comedian the other night, and he said, "Young kids, imagine this: when we wanted to call our friends, we had to dial the numbers and get this that we kept in our mind." And you know, uh, his joke was that today nobody even remembers. I mean, I don't know my kids' phone numbers. I know my phone number, my wife's phone number, because they're one digit difference. We did that when we set them up. But nobody, I mean, I don't know my dad's phone number. I don't know my sister's phone number. I don't know. I mean, honestly, I don't know my phone number at work. And so, because, you don't have to push in the numbers anymore like you used to. And so, uh, it's, while things have changed, I think it's important to still hold on to um, the more timeless features of things that have helped raise good response. I mean, that's, part of our goal as parents is we want to raise responsible kids who are going to be healthy adults who contribute to society and who have, not only good mental health, but also a good sense of, work ethic and other things. And so there's things to be said for having kids follow through with things or giving them chores or saying, hey, you need to go and, do this to better yourself. And a lot of times those things don't involve technology. Sometimes they do, but just as parents, we just need to do, I think, not obviously not a perfect job, but our best at just sort of coaching our kids and helping them grow into responsible adults. And part of that is helping them grow into social media in a responsible way. And so, when a kid is 14 and you say, here, have TikTok, have fun, you don't give them any guidance on it. And, the next thing you know, it becomes a very big problem for them or leads to, social media addiction or whatever. When like just a little bit of education and a little bit of just saying, hey, we can do this, but this is how we're going to do it. And we're not going to watch these kind of videos. We're going to focus on these kind of videos or whatever else. And then give them some foundation like, hey, look, it looks like these people are always happy. Trust me, they're not always happy. Just not everything they do gets on the videos. And just giving some basic advice like that and sort of guidance, I think goes a long way in helping kids to sort of evaluate and think critically about the social media they're consuming and engaging in.
Yeah, and one of the other interesting things when he talked about the difference with boys is especially the boom of the cell phone, the smartphone,
Hmm.
coupled with COVID and all of the inside time. And there's a really good book that I read some years ago, called The Trouble with Boys, and it
Hmm.
talks about the increase in our education system, frankly, to cater towards girls. And that's just true because girls can sit still and pay attention in a way that young boys simply can't, most of them.
Hmm.
And we've seen this massive shift even at the university level of now having far more women than men going into degree programs. And so this is all discussed in the book as well. And part of that is because we've kind of taken some of the primary qualities that make little boys and young men away from them.
Hmm.
You don't get to utilize the some of the God-given skills that it means to be intrinsically male. Um, they don't really get to utilize that when you're sitting in a desk 8 hours a day
Right.
outside when they get to be in PE or in athletics. And of course, there are exceptions to this. My oldest son is an exception to this. He has always had a long attention span. He can sit for long time, and he has never had any trouble being it. So of course there are exceptions. But what happened with the boys is now that they don't have any sort of environment like that in their daily life, the video games are providing that in a
Right.
virtual. And so that leads to the addiction because it makes them feel like they can exercise some of that, but it's in this virtual reality where there's no real risk. And so then we're training up boys um, in such a way that they're not exercising any of their inherent risk. He did this interesting study on not that we want kids to get hurt. We don't want kids to get hurt, but he finds it extremely interesting. He pulled numbers of broken bones in the ages of kids. I don't remember. It was like preteen. That the age you would used to see, like my husband rollerbladed down a slide when he was 11 and broke his, right?
Yeah, yeah.
There aren't
Sounds
boys
normal
doing
to me. Yeah.
they're not doing that now
No.
because they're getting that thrill from the video game. And so, of course, not saying you want kids to have broken bones, yet also a lot of what my husband's profession has involved is taking a lot of risk because he's a business owner. And I
Hmm.
just wonder sometimes if these boys are not being raised in an environment across the board. Like none of us are exempt from this because it's the culture we live in, where they're not being able to take risk.
Mhm.
And then there's the resilience piece for all kids, not just boys. And I see this every single day in school.
Yeah.
The kinds of things that these kids don't feel like they can overcome on a daily basis is just shocking to me. The kinds of things I would never have said to my junior high teacher would have never occurred to me to take this problem to a teacher. And they just feel they can't solve anything themselves. They can't handle anything themselves. I mean, it's a real problem. And I get frustrated when, it's political season and all that. I get frustrated when we're not more worried about this, when we're not thinking ahead to these kids are going to be leading the country in about 20 years. And we're not, I don't think as a culture, we are not focusing enough on the deficits that are happening with the youth of our country. And so,
Mhm.
and I think Jonathan Haidt is correct that so much of it is simply from the distraction boxes.
Yeah.
That's not his term. That's not his term, but it sounds silly and it sounds so simple, and yet it's so impossible. It's so impossible to get away from. Um, and I don't know outside of you having to be really countercultural with a small group of people, or maybe a big group of people. I do think there's hope that some of these kids, you even mentioned that some of the 30 somethings are not big device users because they hated seeing their parents
Mhm.
grow into them. I do think there will be a pendulum swing of, I mean, I do think there are kids that are using social media responsibly or saying, I don't want to be on that because it's bad
Right.
for me. So I think in some ways, the young people are actually more well versed in that than people our age are,
Yeah.
because they see every day the darkness that happens when kids are just on it all day long.
You know, I think that I guess two things here. One, you reminded me of an article a guy named Gerard Jones wrote a number of years ago. Gerard Jones was a comic book writer, and he wrote some pretty violent comics. And he wrote this article saying that violence is good for boys, and here's why. And he's not really going into video games. He's talking about primarily comic books. And he said, when I was a kid, I was afraid to jump out of a tree. But then my dad got me a Tarzan comic. So next thing you know, I was jumping out of trees. And he said, I was afraid to do this as a kid. And then I got an Incredible Hulk comic book, and the Hulk did it. And if I was pretending to be the Hulk, I could do it. And of course, the thing is, all the examples he used are physical type, things. But there is certainly value in, and I agree with him for the most part on his article, but um, there's something with boys that they are drawn towards and need these sort of violent, if you will, role models to give them the push they need sometimes to do things. And when they're not outside and they're not, hanging out with friends and doing stuff as groups of people in community, they're not doing those things that sort of push them to the edge, that help them grow into responsible adulthood. The second thing I want to mention here is that uh, a number of uh, older folks in leadership positions now are not the generation that I'm in, not the generation you're in, but they've had a very difficult time letting go of their power and letting the next generation take over. And I think that a lot of people our age are recognizing this and going, what do we need to do to help encourage the people coming after us to be able to fill these roles? And so, like you are seeing, I think a lot of folks around our age are seeing we need to be doing more because our generation is going to get skipped over on the leadership. I mean, but it is what it is. But we need to be investing in the next generation of leaders so that we can turn things over to them and it be in good, capable hands. Um, there's a Lifeway Bible study series for men called 33 the series. It's about, basing your manhood on Christ and whatnot. And it is a pretty good series on the whole. One of the things they talk about is that the age of, adolescence is 0 to about 20, but 20 to 40 is the age of maturity, growth and maturity, and 40 to 60 is the age of influence. And you should be your most influential in that window. And then from 60 on, it's the age of mentorship and equipping the next generation. And unfortunately, I think what we see in our country right now is a lot of the folks who are 60 and up are going, we don't trust the next guys. We're going to keep doing this. They can't do it as well as us. And that's not everybody, but I mean,
No, it's
I see it
frustrating.
in especially in religious denominations quite a bit. Uh,
Absolutely.
so uh, so that's kind of where we find ourselves. And I think you're absolutely right. We've got to start really pouring into younger generations and giving them opportunities to lead, giving them opportunities to take risks, giving them opportunities to grow so that when they hit the age of mature, they're maturing and getting ready to be leaders and influencers, they'll have the actual skills they need to do that.
Sure. It's one of the favorite things about my job, actually, is starting the year with kids who tell me in written form they don't ever want to solo, they don't ever want to sing alone, they don't ever want to stand on stage in front of people. And by the end of the year, there's always a handful of those kids that end up singing alone in front of 400 people on a stage, and that maybe sounds, oh, that's cute. That's a big deal, though. It's a big skill to develop to be able to have the confidence to stand in front of other people and use your voice, whether that's in a speaking manner or it's singing or whatever. Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge believer in trying to find opportunities for kids to be in leadership, whatever that is, because yeah, they can't learn if they don't have those opportunities. And I just think back to all the opportunities I was given as a
Mhm.
young person. And so many of those things have been farmed out to technology now,
Oh yeah,
and I think it's gonna require some effort and some maybe even backtracking, I don't know,
yeah.
allowing some old school ways. Of course, see, my kids started at a classical school, their first 5 years of education, and I was very drawn to that because I just didn't see a whole lot broken with that system.
Mhm.
And it's not a perfect system. And my kids are much more STEM, math, sciencey type kids, so they're probably better off not in a heavily rhetoric education system the
Sure.
way I would have in that. But they learned public speaking in that sort of an environment. It wasn't let, let's all put it in a Google form, you know.
Right.
And so I just think there's so much head down in the Chromebook now that is preventing kids from doing those kinds of
Yeah.
skills. And you see employers complaining about these skills that kids can't make eye contact and they want to bring mom or
Right.
dad to the interview with them. And it's like, wow, but at the same time, I'm like, that's our fault though. That's the fault of the adults in the room that they're not equipped
Hmm.
to show up to an interview and understand. And so, it's just and that largely is because the adults are also on the distraction boxes
That's right.
so much that we are neglecting. And again, I am guilty of all of this. The doom scrolling and wasting time, that I should be mentoring my own children.
Mhm.
So it's a conviction for me, among all people, but I do think it's serious, and I'm grateful he wrote this book because, I mean, it's all I heard about all summer. I listened to a lot of podcasts, and I think every single one of them talked about it at some point because I think everybody just realizes, this is not just an American problem, is the other thing he talks about. It's global.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a global epidemic. And, we could say, look, technology is great. Technology makes things more efficient, but sometimes it makes things more efficient at the expense of properly training and educating the next leaders. And so, as you're saying, we got to reevaluate. Just because you can doesn't always mean you should. And it's sort of like Jurassic Park, right? I mean, Malcolm in Jurassic Park, the original movie or book, is like, you guys have to stop and think, should we do this? Not just can we do this? And with technology, with social media, there's a lot of things we can do. The question is, what should we be doing? How should we be training people in it? And then how can we be utilizing it in a way that helps our kids and others, ourselves, grow as people and not just stifle that productivity, that growth, that development of responsibility, and so on. And it's something that's going to be different and look different in every household. Um, for some kids, it means getting away from the Nintendo Switch or the PlayStation. For other kids, it means turning off the television. For other kids, it means closing your laptop. And for other kids, it means moving away from the iPad or the cell phone. And not moving away completely, but learning how to monitor the amount of time you're spending on it, and becoming responsible to say, you know what, I've done enough of this. I need to go do something else now. Uh, I mean, and you could honestly, I mean, anybody can make anything too big of a part of their life, but what we see overreaching, in our society right now is the technology and the social media. And I think after people, I mean, if I just let my kids go on social media all day, after a while they come to me and they're just like, I'm bored of this. That's good.
It's
You
the
should be
same
bored of it.
thing.
You've been doing
Oh,
it too long. But um, we've got to just help, our kids learn how to manage and monitor their and monitor themselves with their technology, and not just, well, we're just going to tell you when you've had enough. Like, no, you need to learn to be responsible enough to say, you know what, I see it's starting to get dark out. I wanted to take a walk before it got dark. I got to go, or whatever the case is. So, um, for those of you listening, if you haven't read The Anxious Generation, Jonathan Haidt is a great author. He's written a number of really informative, really thought provoking, very helpful books. I think he cares deeply about our communities, about our culture, about our society. He's also not a believer, to the best of my knowledge. And despite not being a believer, holds very strong moral convictions and values, and cares very deeply about the state of our country and where it's headed, where it's going. And I think that there is a tremendous amount of things that we can learn from his books. And if you got kids, if you are a parent, or you're taking care of your grandparent, taking care of grandkids or whatever, if you've got kids who are addicted to social media, or you are addicted to social media, reading The Anxious Generation is probably going to be a very mind-opening book for you. And I hope that will give you some hope and some fortitude to move forward in a way that helps you overcome that addiction, or help your kids break away from those addictions to their devices, so that you have a healthier and, if you will, more communal family environment in the home. So, Jillian, what other thoughts, if any, do you have for today for the podcast?
I would just maybe share, I'd like to share resources. And just recently, as we were discussing getting my oldest son a phone, heard about a platform called Accountability to You, and it's the number two. I had
Uh-huh.
never heard of it before. I've heard of other ones, Bark and some other things. And what I like about Accountability to You is it's set up like a VPN. It sends you one email at night instead of alerting you over and over and over and over and over. And it will flag, you can set up the parameters to flag, but it flags certain things and it will tell you all the records um, on whichever device you've linked it to. So
Mhm.
like we were saying, you don't necessarily know what YouTube videos they're watching. Well, if you don't want to click on it, you don't have to, but if you click on it, you can go see exactly every single thing that that device accessed. And what I like about it is that it's set up so that the idea is it's not blocking anything,
Mhm.
because sometimes that with some personalities increases the desire to go and find the forbidden fruit. So it's not blocking anything, it's reporting and keeping you accountable. And the idea is that as these teens grow, that maybe they would turn that over in their 20s to a best friend or a minister or somebody that
Yeah,
helps them stay
I think
accountable.
that's
And
good.
so my son, he also was able to figure out how to get YouTube on his Switch, his Nintendo Switch, and his brother ratted him out. And so, and he's a very, very, very obedient child, and he felt that. And I said, I just want you, if you're gonna get on YouTube, I want it to be where I can see what you went to, because things happen, not that you even chose to go to something, but sometimes, unwanted ads, unwanted anything pop up on those devices. So
Mhm.
anyway, I really like that platform so far. We've been using it for like 2 months. And then beyond that, I mean, I think the biggest encouragement I have to parents, especially, is never think you know it all, because it's changing so fast. And now with AI coming quickly, the kids know more than we do about all of this.
Oh yeah.
And it takes effort. But I agree with you that honestly, sorry, that's my dog. I agree with you that the best probable solution is to equip the kids to notice when they need to take a break,
Mhm.
or when they, I'm gonna pause 1 second. Sorry, that's Copper, and he likes to talk a lot too. Um,
Yeah, yeah. It's all good.
he, yeah, he likes to be on the action. But I think, specifically, we didn't really go down this rabbit hole too much, but the other thing for boys is that the pornography issue is such an issue. And I just don't think parents are aware how
Mhm.
bad it is. And that's the other thing I would say, is that you need to talk to your kids now. Now, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know how old your kid is, and it's probably now,
Mhm.
because what the way I've spoken to my sons about this is age appropriate, but it's not if this will happen and you will encounter it. It is when, and you have to decide how you're going to respond when that happens.
Mhm.
And I really did like the book, Good Pictures, Bad Pictures. So I recommend that to parents, because especially for like elementary age, but I like that it talks about the brain, and it
Mhm.
talks about what is happening to your brain when, and it talks about the other people involved in that industry and how it tears women down, and all of that. So I just would say that, again, my observation is that parents are generally woefully unaware of how big of a problem that is with some girls too, but specifically, I teach junior high, and with boys, I
Mhm.
would say, I mean, they're saying now as young as 9, 8, 9, and
Yeah.
it
And
it has to be addressed.
every year that number sort of goes down a little bit. So about 4 years ago, they were like, oh, now for 13, then it was like, oh, now for 10, now for, now you're at 8. Uh, it, as shocking as it may sound, it's not that surprising because of how prevalent everything is. And a lot of times people aren't even, looking for it. It sort of finds them and then, gets a foothold. And so it's certainly something that is definitely worth talking about, especially with the boys. If I mean, I remember I had a conversation with a mom a while back, and she had a 14-year-old, and she's like, "Not my son. He hasn't seen anything like that." And I'm like, "I don't believe you. I think you're lying to yourself."
No, yeah, I know.
Um,
Not
and
not if he's living in the world. I mean,
yeah,
no.
so and you know, with regard to the stuff that's available, I mean, yeah, Texas and other places are trying to pass laws to help that and to counteract that, but there's only so much they can do, and there's so many things that are out of compliance anyway that it's definitely worth the talk. And to your point, it's equipping the kids to say what are the boundaries that I can institute for myself, and how can you help them develop the integrity and the principles that as they grow, um, they don't just adopt those for while they're under your roof, but they adopt those things for their own self, for their own benefit, after they get out on their own. Um, I do like the accountability software, the things that work like a VPN. are really good. Some, excuse me, sometimes they do also not get along with antivirus software. And so if you have antivirus stuff on your computers, you have to always make an exception for those because otherwise they fight with each other because sometimes they see the accountability software as a virus on the computer because it's in the back looking at what someone's doing, which is the same thing a hacker would do. But that
That's
doesn't make them bad. It just it's using something that people use for bad to do something good for accountability purposes. And those kind of tools have been around for a good while now, probably 15 to 20 years. And they've gotten better over time. And they're great for having accountability. And I think it's important to tell your kids you've got to be accountable to yourself, but you also have to be accountable to others. And at some point, you're not accountable to me anymore. You should be accountable to other peers or to other people you have relationships with as you get out on your own.
absolutely.
So, well, for those of you guys listening, we appreciate, as always, you checking us out here on Faith and Culture Now. And we will see you next time. If you have questions, if you have issues that come up that you want us to cover, or that you want us to speak into about technology and parenting or anything like that, or other biblical or cultural issues that deal with faith and what's happening in our society, let us know. We'll be happy to cover those in future podcasts and try to answer your questions on later shows. Jillian, again, thanks for being here tonight, and we will see you guys again next time.